Fortune favors the prepared mind, while vaccines favor the prepared immune system. This is the biggest event, medical event, infectious event of our time. I'm Rich Kessin. Until I retired to Norfolk, I was professor of pathology and cell biology at Columbia University. Now I'm emeritus. And for the last 10 years, I've been writing newspaper articles and generally supporting science around here in the northwest corner, which has been a lot of fun. It's a very receptive area. Then the pandemic came, and now we're over a year in, and it's time to figure out how we're doing and what's going to happen when it's over. And let me emphasize as a scientist that there will surely be another pandemic. I hope not anywhere near as bad as this one, and we would be fools if we didn't take precautions from what we learned from this one. We really need a very thorough after-action report to make sure we do this right. The immune system is based on a principle called clonal expansion. One cell recognizes one antigen presented by some other cell that's already chewed up the antigen. Then it starts to divide, 2, 4, 8, and it moves around the body. But it takes 2 weeks of divisions at say 1 a day to make enough of these things, to make enough antibody to protect you. That's why we need vaccines, because vaccines give you a leg up. Louis Pasteur said, "Fortune favors the prepared mind, while vaccines favor the prepared immune system." The first vaccine that was distributed in modern times was smallpox, and that was from Great Britain. And there are all sorts of cartoons in color, which was rare in those days because it was hard to print these things, of just real objections. And then there were no new vaccines for 70 years until Louis Pasteur came up with anthrax, cholera, and rabies vaccines, and the opposition to that was furious, and it's recorded. But there are almost any vaccine that comes along and faces objections. Why did it take other vaccines, including measles, mumps, rubella, all those things, why did it take so long? And that's because we didn't, in 1963, have any way of sequencing the genome. So we had to test and test and test, or else we'd create a disaster. Until you got a virus that didn't cause disease, but provoked an immune response. And that is the fundamental basis of vaccines. Back to Pasteur, the very first vaccine, which was anthrax. Nowadays, that's not true, because we've sequenced all of these things and we've done a lot of ex post facto stuff. We now know what the sequence of the polio vaccines. But if we'd known that back then, we could have found an interesting gene, chopped it out, and just used that, which is what we're doing with SARS. And the other thing we did, because we had a lot of private money and we realized early on how serious it was, we started building plants in a way that was perhaps not what a company unsupported by government funds or private funds would have done. In this case, we have lots of plants, lots of bottling stuff, and what we didn't have was distribution in this country and organization. The NIH is not a manufacturing facility, and Moderna is, or at least could organize it. And so they could produce it much more safely and much larger scale than the NIH could. It just takes too much time of their time to develop these and package these vaccines, so they license it. So that's why it was fast. It's a question of numbers. We've now inoculated over 100 million people in this country, which is something of a record. We have done this before, because when smallpox came to New York in the 40s, they vaccinated 8 million people in something like 10 days. And that was something, that's a classical case. Anyhow, there's no way to know the future, It's like the old song. The future's not ours to see, but it hasn't happened. Tests are extensive, but they have to be in the present. But if there are and they follow vaccinated people for a long time. And also the immune system subsides. You can't have your immune system going full tilt all the time, or there'll be nothing left for the next virus. So I'm not too worried about that. They will follow these people who were the original in the clinical trials, tests for 2 years anyway. And that's very thorough and it's very expensive. It's unlikely, it's not impossible, but on the other hand, COVID, it's a clear and present danger. So you have to take some risks. Americans love to have risk-free medicine, and it's just not possible. It's the hardest thing in the world to prove something of that nature, absolutely. And so if we did that, it would be impossible for us to, advance public health, as it were. The flu, at worst, killed 60,000 people in a very, very bad year. It was almost exclusively old people. We have 550,000 people who've died now. And it's a miserable disease. It lasts a long time if you're on an incubator, if you're intubated. And that's just really bad. And then there are these sequelae, which we have yet to deal with, long COVID. SARS produces an enormous amount of virus. One fact I can give you is that in some of the original patients in Wuhan, physicians in the emergency room treated this poor guy who was in his 40s or 50s, and he kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then they wanted to know what was causing it. So with permission, they inserted a tiny bit of saline deep into his lungs. So it floated around there and it picked up virus in it. And then they extracted it, and it was 4 drops, 200 microliters about. And in that 200 microliters, there were hundreds of millions of virus. So that's a lot of virus. And virologists are really used to big numbers, but that's a lot of virus. And I'm not sure what the number would be for flu, but in this case, it was plenty. And when it gets coughed up as gobs. So at least you can stop it with a mask. That's true of also many pathogens. The CEO of Pfizer, which is really a professional company, and of the BioNTech, which is the German startup that figured this out, refused to take government money. That vaccine is not funded. They sat down and they said, we're going to do this no matter what. They are not, drug companies are not, and the people who run them are not intrinsically less ethical than academic scientists. And you don't want academic scientists. That's not their job. Their job is to find new stuff and not to be manufacturers. So that's why they license stuff and license inventions. And this university makes a lot of money off it, but there are rules. You have to reinvest it in, graduate student fellowships or medical student training or whatever, buildings. And so do they make money? Pfizer didn't make money off the government, Nick, okay? They declined because they didn't want the interference of the administration. Other companies, Moderna started at the NIH, of course, but the guy who did it and handed it over, just getting a federal salary. It takes an international effort to get ready. And it's, if somebody said, okay, there's an asteroid coming to the Earth, everybody would get together really fast. But instead, we, withdrew from the World Health Organization. We had a collaboration with the lab in China that found the virus. We knew what viruses they were looking for and had sequenced, and then that got blocked. We had a program called PREDICT, which goes out and looks for very dangerous viruses so we'll know we can be prepared. It's vastly expensive to even make a prototype virus. But those things were sent by the boards, and even the pandemic response plan of the Obama administration was not followed. Even the logistics of moving vaccine and supplies around were invented de novo when we have a huge capacity to move things around. So we didn't respond in any way that was well. And the biggest thing we didn't do in public health, the most important thing is Rochelle Walensky, who has the respect of everyone, or Tony Fauci or any of the other people. We didn't level with the American people. We assured them of things we didn't know. Or, it's going to go away tomorrow. It's going to go away when the weather gets warm. We didn't do that necessarily. If it were a flu virus, you might have had a basis to say that, but it wasn't. It's very hard to vaccinate, 250 million people or whatever it has to be. But if you keep at it, then eventually you get an appointment. And especially now that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is a one-shot deal, is available. If you keep applying, you will get a slot. And all you have to do is go to CVS or Walgreens or whatever. I was opposed to that in the beginning, but then I thought about it. If you want to get vaccines out quickly to people, why not? So it's unfortunate, but the software has to be vastly improved, and that will happen, I'm sure. 1% of people get desperately ill, but it costs a fortune to treat them, and many people die, especially older people, beloved of their families, and it causes all sorts of family grief, and it's totally avoidable at this stage. Well, the scientific community is, developing an inhaled thing, as we have for flu, but it's a very small needle. I don't know. I didn't even feel it. You're distracted, and the nurse is chatting with you, and all of a sudden, zip, it's over, goodbye. It's the thing that's always been hard to imagine, is that such a simple thing can save you from such a catastrophic result. And that's been true also throughout, but since the 19th century. Back to international cooperation, the World Health Organization is not without it. We all have our failures, but perfection is not what we're after here. We're after hard work, results, and also for fighting disease and in general, or pandemics in particular. It's not just, in our world, if we made a strain that would be a vaccine strain, we thought, okay, we're done. But that's not true. We got to manufacture tons of it. We got to put it through expensive clinical trials. It's got to get through committees. We can't just do it ourselves. You just can't go out and do that. And then it has to go all around the world, because God knows Ebola virus and all the Zika virus, they transmit around the world. So if people are not safe in Uganda, they're not safe here. And so that's a tough thing to do, but it takes a major effort. And it comes with international travel now, it comes awfully fast. And we have avoided the Ebola catastrophe. But that's not to say that if it were a respiratory virus or something, then that we would have defeated it. So the best thing to do is to study biology, and if you want to contribute to this as a nurse, a public health worker, a physician, a pilot, anything. All aspects of human life are involved in fighting a pandemic, and it's a historian, anything, then that's a fascinating field, and it's possible to do it without vast expense.